Hi, so welcome to another episode of Cricket Cards on YouTube. So today I wanted to kind of cobble something together as there's a lot of change going on in the space of cricket collectibles. I mean, historically, those that have been involved in the space for a while, you kind of know this, but we've been set collectors and generally kind of chase after what we kind of typically call true scarcity or true rarity. And that's changing. We're getting kind of this gradual influx of American collectors typically, and they bring their own styles and philosophy. And we're actually seeing that impact the space significantly. We've been in this kind of time of almost stagnation since 1999, really. And it really actually happened because of Tops. And much of the change that's actually happening now that's positive is, again, because of Tops. But last time it wasn't that positive. You see, for those of you that kind of are not too familiar with cricket is very different because of the formats to what you typically see with maybe an American sport. So if you're looking for the best basketball league in the world, it's the NBA. It's really quite simple. If you're looking for the best baseball league, it's the Major League Baseball League in America. But in cricket, it's very different. You see, we have all these different formats, and I'll kind of touch on this at the end. And this makes it really difficult because typically where all the fans get together is for the international competitions, the World Cups. Otherwise, it's very fragmented and there's no like that's the league that everybody follows. And so Topps kind of originally entered the space and moved the sets from international licensing to domestic licensing. And they have a history of kind of the country that's the world champion at that time, their domestic league must be the go-to domestic league, and it's just not the case. And so they focused on these domestic licenses, and that kind of just continued to go across all the other kind of micro bands as Topps realized that didn't work, and that gap was filled every now and then by some very small brands. But now we're seeing some change in that space as Topps is actually testing the international products again. So, right, I hope this is going to be interesting. All right, let's jump in. So maybe if we can kind of look at this through the eyes of some of the newer collectors that are coming into the space. If you look at the sales of cards and all of the different sports around the world, I mean, they've been incredible. Now, I think there's probably a strong argument that some of these cards here probably wouldn't sell for these prices right now. But there is it's a really interesting space with a lot of value that people take very seriously as investments. And if you look at, for example, cricket, I'm not aware of any sales that we've had that have been too close to even the highest value sale of she's an incredible player, but the college women's basketball player. So that tells you something when we think about where the hobby is right now, and actually there used to be some product parity 20 years ago, but that has just disappeared because of that kind of vacuum of products. So when we think about kind of the sport as a whole, cricket is hugely popular around the world. It's one of the most followed sports. I think it's probably the second most followed sport. Typically, the research that I've seen looks somewhat similar to this presentation. If we look at the popularity of the sport, I mean, outside of North Korea, because North Korea actually has the largest stadium in the world, the largest stadium is the Narendra Modi Stadium. I think the capacity is about 130,000 on that. It's a huge stadium for a country that absolutely loves the sport. Right, so where I wanted to begin with the cards was kind of just taking us back to almost day one. So we began, in the time of absolutely tremendous facial hair, and it was a gentleman's sport, and I think that was absolutely the style at the time. And so we started with, the CDV cards. We then moved on to the cabinet cards. And then you've got the kind of old Judge set that you're probably familiar with as American, if you're an American collector. You had a lot of different characters in that. And there were actually some cricketers. Actually, there was the first set of cricketers. I think it could have been 6 subjects. I'm not quite sure. But those were part of the 1887 or 88 set that came out, and then there was a later print run, and that was so the first one was the UK cricketers. The next one I think it was 1890, that was Australian subjects in that one. And again, the sets I'm going to take you through here, they're not necessarily particularly valuable. Some are valuable, some are not, but it's just to give you a sense of kind of what's come. So as we move on, we kind of saw the proliferation of tobacco and confectionery cards, and some kind of really interesting collectors. There was a collector called Edward Wharton Tiger. I mean, when you hear his name, you've got to have a sense that there's something interesting behind that. He was a spy, and so, but he's also recognized as having the largest tobacco collection in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. I don't know if he still does. It was over 1 million cards. You can see this collection. He bequeathed it to the British Museum. Probably the most recognizable card in that collection is going to be the Honus Wagner T206 that I've pictured here. That is the exact card in his collection. And so in cricket, much like we saw in American sports, we had this kind of renaissance of collectibles taking place in the 90s. So where kind of all these manufacturers are starting to compete against each other and come up with some really incredible designs. And so we have manufacturers in India, South Africa, a lot of product produced in Australia. So we have the kind of first on-card autos, and the first one happened in 1993, and then kind of we've had the refractors and all of the other kinds of things. And right, so kind of what are we seeing today? So this is kind of, I guess, the ultra modern. So we see kind of the first cards that Topps put out. So the match used cricket bat card for Adam Gilchrist and different things like that. So there was some innovation that was starting to happen there. We've got kind of almost a bit of a knockoff. I think this is Brett Lee is from 2017 of the RPAs from Topps in 2003. So, but when we look at what we have right now, we have several small brands that are producing product, and this can be player licenses. Sometimes they have domestic licenses, and so Traders is one of the ones in Australia. And then Topps entered the market with kind of a really low end card, and I don't know how well that has done. And there's another brand out of America called Sports Nection that have kind of player licenses. And then we have Topps, so the Legend set, which is very similar to the Legend set from Traders, which came out first. This is an interesting set. I speak about it in another video. Yeah, I really hope that Topps was able to get the insights that they were hoping for from this launch, and maybe it will give them the confidence that they need to go after the more costly licenses and the ones that people really want to see. So if you think about the space from maybe a speculator or an investor's point of view, it's honestly it's not been that great. It's really a collector's space because today's prices generally are yesterday's prices. Now, when I say that, there definitely has been some movement over the past kind of a year or so. But if we look back to maybe pre-pandemic, those prices in 1999, 2000 were pretty much exactly the same prices, and actually, many of the prices of the more valuable cards have come down because they were possibly scarce cards, but they weren't the chase cards for what we kind of see the new money paying for, which is the rookies, the real scarce ones of the most famous players, and also kind of the manufactured rarity. So the grades from the likes of PSA and Beckett and things like that. So one of the things I also want to point out is the comparison here that I'm going to walk through in no way is designed to indicate that the two cricket cards are anywhere close in value to the Jordan. The Jordan is arguably one of the most iconic, I would say probably the most iconic card from the 90s. And it's in a different world. So this is not about that, but it's also good to understand kind of where things were and what happens when there's that vacuum. So if we look back, maybe take it back to 1998, there was a time, and it would have made a lot of sense to do it, where the Shane Warne card there was a sale. I think actually I don't know if they ended up agreeing to sell it. It's written about in the Futura file, where the first Shane Warne hat trick card was actually valued. I think it would be about $2,500 US, which at that time you could have gotten the green and the red for that price. The Bradman Auto was kind of what you'd pay for the highest condition or the best condition of the red Jordan, and that was about the same. And these two cards, so the Bradman has continued to probably be the most important cricket card from the 90s, and there's probably a fair argument that the Shane Warne is the second one. And so they've just kind of stagnated there, and then recently they've started to kind of tick back up. So there was an auction house in Australia that sold the Bradman for 8,000 Australian dollars, but unlike with the US auction houses, the Australian ones and the UK ones, they don't put the premium on the sale price. They just put the sale price. So I think it was 9,500 Australian dollars after the auction house's fees. Oh yeah, and just one final point: where that Topps logo is, that's where Topps came into the market. And yeah, as soon as they came in, stopped the international sets, started focusing on domestic, everything just went down. Right. So kind of what does this state of collecting look like at the moment? There's probably where the largest market is it's going to be in India. Is possibly followed by Australia, UK, and then the rest of the world. But you've got different catchments that focus on different things. I would say kind of the UK is mostly been vintage. Australia has been a mix of modern and vintage, and India's been everything. There's been a lot of products that have been produced in most of the cricketing nations. But if you look at some Australia, you look at India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, probably even more than the products, there was a lot of freebies. So you get a box of cereal and you get a couple of cricket cards in there as well. So there is not just this massive product, but there's also a massive collectors that have collected the freebie cards as kids. This is just a guess, but when looking at the print runs and the kind of sets that were produced, the amount of freebies that were created, there has to be several million collectors that are probably between the age of 25 and 55 that collected as a kid and haven't collected in the past 15, 20 years. So one of the questions that will be answered probably over the coming years is, are there any products that are produced by Topps that actually get these kind of nostalgic collectors, possibly with disposable income, off the bench? Or is Topps going to take more of a kind of like fresh start approach? Kind of what's going on in the space that's quite interesting at the moment. Well, if you look at kind of some of the celebrities in the space, let's just take LeBron James, for example, and Virat Kohli. LeBron, 159 million followers on Instagram, Virat, 266 million. It's hugely popular, the sport. It already has a fan base. It's arguably one of the most mature sports in the world. I think cricket started, in its earliest form, started over 300 years ago, I think. So it's been around a while. And then Fanatics has started to come in, and they're not really making the same mistakes that Topps used to make on its own. They're hopefully start to kind of understand the landscape that they're walking into, and it is nothing like kind of the American sets that the Topps are used to creating. We also have the Olympics coming up in 2028. This is the first time that cricket has been in the Olympics for over 100 years. We've got Fanatics starting to pick up a bunch of cricket licenses, so they were posting a job for a business development manager that I think they've now filled, but they have kind of 4 cricket licenses that they mention in that. They didn't even mention the Legends licenses either, so maybe that's at least 5 that we know of that they have, and hopefully they're exploring the international licenses as well. So we've got the T20 World Cup taking place this year. It's spread between a couple of countries, and some of those matches are in New York. And those New York matches, especially the ones with India, have already sold out. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I don't know why they're in America. Hopefully, this gives Americans the chance to find out a little bit more about cricket. So yeah, I guess in conclusion, cricket is amazing if you're a collector. So what's between you and the chase cards is really just your time, research, connections. It's not so much of a budgeting issue, especially in comparison to US collectibles. At least historically, that's been the case. So, you can come in and you can build great sets, of actual sets, or maybe Hall of Famer sets, and all of these different things. And that's what we've seen actually happen a lot with American collectors. And they're not just coming in as speculators; they're also coming in as collectors and appreciating the history of the sport. Is there an opportunity here for speculating? I don't know. It's, if, like I touched on before, it's not been a great investment historically, but it's been like a joy to chase the cards. So, will this change? I don't know. I guess it's probably no worse than collecting, any other memorabilia related product. So if you're new to cricket, enjoy it. And one word of caution: the rabbit hole is deep and it's wide, and before you know it, you can be everywhere and nowhere. So kind of take your time to understand the space. I've got quite a few videos on here of the resources and materials that you can use, and yeah, and I hope you find it as interesting as I have over the years. So cool. All right. Oh, any questions? Drop me a message on Instagram. Cheers.